Okay. Good afternoon, which is afternoon time in New York. Good evening in Paris, Mireille. Good afternoon in the Caribbean. Good afternoon to everyone. Today is the 6th of February in the United States of America. Welcome to the hearings of the International Commission of Inquiry on Systemic Racist Police Violence Against People of African Descent in the United States. These hearings are a process by which witnesses can present accounts of the unjustified killings and maimings of Black individuals by police officers in the United States before an international panel of human rights experts. We now begin the hearing in the case of Casey Goodson. My name is Horace Campbell, and I'm the rapporteur for this hearing. Presiding over this hearing is Commissioner Clare Roberts of Antigua and Commissioner Mireille Fanon-Mendes-France of France. The first witness for the hearing, the witnesses for the hearing are Sarah Gelsomino and Tamala Payne. There will be 50 minutes for this hearing. Witnesses will testify, followed by a period of questions from the commissioners. I will call time at the 20-minute mark and the 45-minute mark. Please excuse my interventions. Commissioners Roberts and France, I now present to you Sarah Gelsomino. Sarah Gelsomino.
Good afternoon.
Please confirm your name.
I am Sarah Gelsomino.
Do you promise that your testimony to the Commission inquiry will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
You may begin.
Thank you. I first want to thank you, Mr. Campbell. Thank you to the commissioners and to the commission entirely for convening this very, very important series of hearings about the human rights crisis that we are continuing to experience here in the United States with police violence against Black people in particular. I have the great honor and privilege of representing the family of Casey Goodson Jr. I am a civil rights lawyer at the law firm of Friedman, Gilbert, and Gerhard Stein, and I represent the family of Casey along with Sean Walton and Shonda Brown from the Walton and Brown law firm in Columbus, Ohio. Ms. Payne is here with us today. Ms. Payne is Casey's mother, and she will be the next witness. It has been 64 days since Casey Goodson Jr. was murdered by Franklin County Deputy Sheriff Jason Mead. Franklin County is a county in central Ohio. It is the county in which Columbus, Ohio sits. Columbus is the capital of this state. Casey was 23 years old when he was murdered. Ms. Payne will tell you more about Casey's life, but he was a particularly vibrant and loving and hardworking young man. And he was killed for no other reason other than he was a Black man who was in legal possession of a firearm. He was killed as he was walking into his own home. He was shot in the back multiple times as he walked through the door to his home. He fell onto his kitchen floor where his family found him before they were all ordered out of the house at gunpoint by other police officers who poured into the home after Mead shot Casey. Casey was not committing any crime when he was shot. He did not pose a threat to any officer or anyone else. He was walking into his home filled with his family. At the time, there were 9 family members inside that house, 5 adults and 4 children. Now, it's important context in understanding this case that in the state of Ohio, as in many states in the United States of America, the right to carry a firearm is a deeply cherished and protected right. First of all, Ohio is what we call an open carry state. It means that it is entirely legal to carry firearms, including large firearms like assault rifles. Often we see more right-wing protesters, including recently anti-mask protesters, protesting without any issue while carrying openly very large firearms without any incident or intervention from the police. Often these protesters are white. Often these protesters are in Columbus, Ohio, because that is where the state house of the government is for the state. Ohio also has laws regulating the use of concealed carry firearms. If a person in the state attends a concealed carry class, and obtains a license, then they are legally permitted to carry a concealed firearm. Casey was a gun rights advocate. He did take and complete his concealed carry class. He did have his CCW license, and he did regularly carry firearms. On December 4th, as he did on most other days, he did have a pistol. That morning, December 4th, Casey got up and went to the dentist. He spoke to his mother. He stopped at Subway on his way home to grab lunch for him and his family, and he drove home for what would end up being the last time. At that time, there was police activity in the neighborhood. This police activity had nothing at all to do with Casey or anyone associated with Casey. There was U.S. Marshals Task Force, fugitive task force, that was attempting to serve an arrest warrant to a person who lived nearby. This warrant, as I said, had nothing to do with Casey. The United States Marshals Fugitive Task Force, I don't know if any other evidence has been presented to you about any of their activities throughout this hearing, but they are notorious nationwide for using excessive and unnecessary force, including deadly force. They are a task force of the United States Marshals, so a federal agency, but they work with local law enforcement officers. So a local law enforcement department will nominate or appoint certain members of that department to join the task force to conduct these searches for fugitives. That activity, that U.S. Marshal activity in that neighborhood, we believe to have been completely unnecessary that day. They were looking for a person who had just been indicted. That person was not even aware that there was a warrant out for his arrest yet. He was indicted for drug trafficking related charges. He had done nothing to warrant an aggressive police presence to search for him to conduct this warrant. He was at work actually when the U.S. Marshals went to his home to look for him. They showed up heavily armed and extremely aggressive. They did interact with this man's mother and sister in a very aggressive, harassing, and threatening way. And they left apparently frustrated because they failed to find this man who they were looking for. It is our understanding that when this man actually learned that he had a warrant for his arrest, he turned himself in voluntarily without any incident. So again, the task force did not need to go out and threaten and terrify a neighborhood and escalate a situation which eventually led to the murder of Casey Goodson. They shouldn't have been there in the first place. But when they left, this is when Jason Mead, who was working with that task force that day, apparently still hyped up from his failed mission, still heavily armed with his assault rifle, which he carried during that failed mission, came across Casey. I'd like to take some time to talk about Jason Mead. Jason Mead has an extraordinarily sordid past as a police officer. He should not be a police officer. And I want to make sure to note, so I don't forget later, he is still a police officer. He has had no discipline. There has been no, he has not been removed from the force. He has not been fired. He has had no consequences for his actions when he chose to take the life of Casey Goodson in December. So as a deputy, what we do know of his background is, as I said, problematic. Jason Mead was involved in one other use of deadly force that we know of that happened in 2018. It was also during a time where he was tasked to the U.S. Marshals Task Force. He fired, along with many others, at a trailer in Pike County, Ohio, and 2 people ended up dead. He was not disciplined. That shooting was found justified, as police shootings in the United States typically are, and he suffered no consequences for taking the lives of those 2 people. In 2019, Mead was justified for using a taser without notifying his supervisors, in violation of policy. In 2010, his supervisor noted that Mead is content with doing the, quote, bare minimum to get by at his job. At that time, interestingly, he was assigned to investigate civilian complaints against police officers, and he failed to investigate them. He was transferred out of a special unit because of insubordination of his superiors. And for years as a corrections officer, also with the Franklin County Sheriff's Department, he was not permitted to have any contact with inmates. Contact with inmates is like the primary role of a corrections officer, but because of his behavior and an internal affairs investigation into his conduct, the department felt it necessary to remove him from any contact with inmates. Yet he remained a deputy and does to this day. And as if all of these warning signs were not enough over the years to question Mead's fitness to serve as a police officer, his own public statements in which he justifies his use of force by relying on his faith in his Christian God, that should have been enough to warn the department that he is a dangerous man who is unfit to be a police officer. At this point, I'd like to play for you some excerpts of Jason Mead himself talking about his belief in how force can and should be used as a righteous release, and how he uses his faith to justify that release. This is an excerpt from a YouTube video that was put out actually by the department, and a sermon that he gave where many of his supervisors and colleagues were present.
Excuse me, Ms. Gelsomino, my apologies. The audio on your screen share is not working.
Oh, thank you for telling me.
I believe that when you do your screen share from Zoom, make sure that you have checked at the bottom to share audio and optimize for video clip, because otherwise it just provides garbled sounds. Thanks so much.
The Bible doesn't.
Is that better?
Contradict.
Yes, the audio is fine now. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
The Bible doesn't contradict our involvement in the community. It complements it. Everything that I do on a daily basis is complemented by the Word of God. The greatest servant that we'll ever know of, ever in the history of this world, is Jesus Christ, God's only Son. He was the servant of all servants. What are we? We serve the public. There is times for righteous release. That's what I call it when we have a use of force. Because every now and then you have to actually use force. We don't go around looking for it because we don't have to. Plenty of people out there will give you that opportunity. Right. So we don't have to be bullies going looking for it. That's why I say it's a righteous release. There is release in our job that righteously we can actually have a use of force. And I've had people say, how can you hurt someone? Jesus said, turn the other cheek. And I say, read your Bible. He ain't talking about physically getting slapped in the side of the face. And when he's saying that, it's in offense to his name. Hold on, am I suffering from crime and criminals in the name of Jesus? No. This
Right.
this isn't for his name's sake. So that's why we take the Bible out of context and we take service out of context. Like you can't be a man and be a Christian. Jesus
Right.
was the manliest man in the history of mankind.
Right. Well, and I'm sure.
You know what David did? He threw the first punch. He threw the first punch, didn't he? All this to throw the first punch. You say, what? I don't know. Let me tell you something. I work for the sheriff's office down in Franklin County in Columbus. I work on a tactical SWAT team, and I also work for the U.S. Marshals Task Force. I hunt people. It's a great job. I love it. I got a bunch of my SWAT members here, and even my bosses are here. I appreciate them coming out. They're good men of God. I'm glad they came out to support us today. But they'll let you know, I've worked this job 14 years. You know, I ain't never been hit clean in the face one time. It's a fact. It ain't because I'm so good. I ain't bad, but I ain't because I'm so good. You know why? Because I learned long ago I got to throw the first punch. And I learned long ago why I'm justified in throwing the first punch. Don't look up here like, oh, police brutality. The people I hit, you wish you could hit. Trust me. Right? Yeah. Every time I hit them, I'm like, that's for you. That's for you. That's not that bad. It's not that bad. I'm kidding. But listen, this is the truth. You throw a punch, and the pursuit will follow. You want unity? They arose. This is going to bother some of you. And shouted. And pursued the Philistines. Anybody want to put the devil on the run? My favorite part is when the devil gets put on the run. And let me tell you why. Look what keeps going. They pursued. The punch was thrown. The damage was dealt. The champion fell. The enemy ran. Now this army is full of courage. They're reminded of the promise. They're reminded of the anointing. They're reminded there's a God in heaven. They're reminded that there is victory in Jesus. They run after them and they chase them off. Yes, praise the Lord. Then they spoiled their tents. What are we saying? Somebody needs to punch today. Somebody needs to throw the first punch. David was the first one to do it, and then what happened? Everybody followed. I tell you, it's contagious. One of my SWAT guys throws a punch, I got to throw one in too. It's the truth. We have this little saying, hey, if you're going to get in trouble, I'm going to get in trouble too. You get days off, I get days off too. We'll make a vacation out of it. I mean it too. They know I mean it. Because the best part about it is, if you run them off, on your way back, you're going to pick up all the spoils. The hardest part about it is somebody needs to make the first move. Somebody's got to throw the first punch. And as soon as that punch is thrown, everybody's going to say, oh, that looks fun. That looks good. He's got his enemy down. I want to go after mine.
That's Jason Mead. That is an officer who joked about hunting people, jokes about police brutality, jokes about throwing the first punch. And he did it all in front of his supervisors, in front of his colleagues, and no one did anything about it. He was allowed back on the street. He is still permitted back on the street with the power of the badge, and that is the man who killed Casey Goodson Jr. Now, Casey was just killed in December of 2020, and the investigation into that use of force is ongoing. So we unfortunately have a lot of questions that are not answered still. And Tamala will speak to that. But what we do know is that Mead approached Casey outside of his home. As I said, Casey wasn't involved in any kind of illegal activity. We know from the statements of lawyers who represent Jason Mead that Mead will claim that Casey pointed a gun at Mead. However, that is wholly out of character for a person like Casey. Casey had no criminal background. He had never had any problems with the police. He worked and he took care of his family, and he believed in lawful, legal gun ownership. he took that very seriously, and he was very safe with his firearms. So it's just an incredulous claim that this young man, as he was standing at the back door of his house with a bag of Subway sandwiches for his family, would have pointed a gun at the police officer and refused to drop it. It doesn't make sense. Meade wasn't wearing a body camera, so unfortunately, we don't know exactly what happened. But we know that he will try to justify his behavior, and we know that the ranks of police officers around him will gather together to try to cover up his misconduct. Immediately after the shooting of Casey, not only the federal marshal, but also the Franklin County sheriff came out claiming that the shooting was justified. They had no reason to say that, but that they were trying to cover up the actions of their deputy and prevent any kind of thorough and fair investigation into this case. Thankfully, the FBI and the Department of Justice have come in to investigate this case, and thus far, we believe that they are doing their best to have a thorough and fair investigation, and we are hopeful that some justice will result from that investigation, but we are still waiting. Meade shot Casey with an assault rifle. He fired multiple times. He fired through the outside screen door. Casey opened the outside screen door, which was glass at the time. And then there was the interior wooden door. As he was between those doors, entering into his kitchen, he was shot. Some of the assault rifle bullets went through the metal screen on that screen door and left 3 bullet holes in that screen before they went into Casey's back. His grandma saw him laying on the kitchen floor with gunshots to his back. Family inside never heard any warnings. They had no idea that there was any kind of commotion outside. The first thing that they heard was gunshots, glass shattering. They ran into the kitchen and they saw Casey lying on the kitchen floor, dying, and then they were ordered out of the house. I'd like to pass this off to Tamala because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions, but I do want to raise one issue about accountability, and this because he was acting as a U.S. Marshal or on the U.S. Marshal's task force at the time that he shot and killed Casey. There is a very interesting area of kind of additional impunity that I think needs to be raised to the attention of this commission. When there is a local law enforcement officer tasked with federal powers, they get lost in the system. To become a federal officer, there's particular training and schooling and requirements that the officer has to achieve. I doubt that Jason Meade could have achieved any of those. But the way that this task force works is that the task force just takes the word of the local law enforcement agency and takes on whomever the agency recommends. They don't do any kind, as far as we know, they don't do any kind of research or checking or additional training of any of these local law enforcement agencies before they bring them on to conduct federal business. And then the question becomes, not only do we have an issue with training, but who is in charge of oversight? Who is in charge of discipline? Should he be disciplined through the federal agency, but they don't really have authority over him? Or should he be disciplined through the local law enforcement agency, but they can cover themselves by claiming he wasn't actually working on our business, he was doing the federal business. So what we see around the country in these kinds of cases is that these officers end up with no real investigation or discipline because both of the law enforcement bodies can point their fingers at each other, and then these officers just continue using force without ever learning, not even having any retraining or any kind of employment consequences, let alone criminal consequences for their illegal use of force. So we implore you as the commission to please help us demand justice for Casey, not only a thorough investigation, but also criminal charges. And also, Jason Meade must be fired. He cannot continue to be a police officer putting people at risk every day while he is out there with a badge and a gun and the power of the state. He is clearly unfit for this job. He is clearly dangerous. Casey should never have even had an interaction with him, let alone been killed by him in December of this year. He should have been celebrating his 24th birthday at the end of January with his family. Jason Mead cannot continue to be a police officer. He cannot take one more life or hurt one more person. Thank you again. I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Payne now to speak to us about Casey, and then we'll be available for questions.
Thank you very much. We've now passed the 26-minute mark. Commissioner, I'm going to swear in Tamala Payne, Commissioner Roberts, and Commissioner Mireille Fanon-Mendes-France. I now present to you the second witness, Tamala Payne. Tamala Payne.
Yes,
Please confirm your name.
my name is Tamala Payne.
Do you promise that your testimony to Commission Inquiry will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief? I repeat, do you promise that your testimony to Commission of Inquiry will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Tamala, can you hear?
Looks like Ms. Payne's screen went black, like she lost her connection. You know, she can always phone in if necessary. I think she's back.
My name is Tamala Payne.
Good, thank you. Let me repeat. Do you promise that your testimony to the Commission of Inquiry will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
You may begin.
My name is Tamala Payne. I am the mother of Casey Goodson Jr. And as Sarah told y'all, he was executed on December 4th, 2020. Before I talk about that day, you know, Casey was a good kid. My son has never been in trouble with the law, period. My son believed heavily in gun ownership. He did all the right things to obtain his guns. He did obtain his license first. He bought all his guns legally. He carried them legally. He shot them legally at a gun range. He was very, very big on gun licensing. If you carried a gun, he convinced my sister to get her CCW license. He convinced my other son to get his CCW license. Casey was a very hardworking man. At the age of 23, Casey had already obtained his CDL license. December 2019, he had just came off road from driving cross country for Walmart in California for 6 months. Casey had started his own independent car wash business, car wash and detailing business. Casey was just a kid that did everything right and did everything for himself. I mean, it was a senseless murder. He's a very big protector. He protected, I have 10 children. He's the oldest. He was not only a big brother to his siblings, he was a father figure as well. He was very involved in my other children's lives. He, when he came off the road in 2019, I had just, it was Christmas time and I was pregnant with twins that were due in February, but I went into labor early on December 28th and gave birth to the twins, and they were premature and they did a couple of weeks in the NICU. Casey was supposed to go back out on the road. Casey chose to stay home with me to help me take care of the twins and got a job here at home so that he could be home to help with the kids. So that should give you a little type of idea of the type of person that Casey is. On December 4th, you know, well, early that morning at about 4 a.m., Casey had texted me and told me that he loved me. Casey worked nights, so he wouldn't get off until 3 a.m. And I worked nights as well, and I didn't get off till about 7 a.m. So we would communicate a lot during the night, but he did text me that morning out the blue and said, I love you, and put a whole bunch of exclamation behind it. And I texted him back. That day, my 5-year-old had a cold. So when I dropped the twins off at the daycare center, I couldn't drop my 5-year-old off because of the pandemic and the cold thing. So I called my mom and let my mom know that I would be bringing him there, which Casey lived with my mother. And when I got there, Casey wasn't there. So I took my son in. But when I left out, I called Casey. And Casey had got up that day and went to the dentist. He was in the dentist's chair when I called him. And we talked for a minute and we lost connection. And he texted me like, Mama, the dentist had her fingers in my mouth. And I'm like, you good? Because I was on my way to my second job. And approximately 2 hours later, I got a phone call from my 5-year-old son who witnessed the murder, the execution. Is screaming at the top of his lungs, "Mommy, mommy, get here. Casey just got shot. He's laying on the kitchen floor. Mommy, he's dead. Get here. Mommy, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I'm so scared." And of course, I'm like, Casey got shot. Who would shoot Casey? Like, who would shoot Casey? Like, my son's never been in the streets. He don't do the clubs. He don't hang out with a whole bunch of friends or none of that. So, my mind is everywhere. And I'm not really, it's my 5-year-old, but he's screaming and crying. So I know it's something wrong. So I'm trying to call my daughter. And when I call my daughter, she's like, Mommy, somebody shot Casey. We don't know who it is. They look like the police, but we're not sure. So I rushed there. And I get to the scene, and by this time, they done took Casey on the stretcher, but the U.S. Marshals is out there, the Columbus Police Department is out there. They won't tell us nothing. They won't tell us where they took Casey. Of course, I'm irate and I'm yelling and screaming, and they're calling me out my name and telling us to get back. And he didn't point his gun at me, but he stood at a stance with his gun, basically if I came any farther. It was like in a threatening manner. I couldn't even go to the hospital to be with my son if he was alive at all, because they wouldn't tell me where he was or where they took him. Our whole family was out there and they were just rude. They held my family at gunpoint. My brother had his 3-year-old daughter in his hand, and the same man that murdered my son, as he stood over my son's dead body, he pointed the gun at my brother and his 3-year-old daughter, ordering them to get out of the house before he shoots them too. My 18-year-old daughter didn't have any clothes on whatsoever. They made her go out. My mother, 72-year-old mother, seen Casey's body laying on the floor. She was able to tell us where some of the bullet holes were. They took him outside in the cold, no coats, no shoes. They wouldn't let him get the keys to the car. They kept him out in the car for hours, freezing cold, wouldn't let him leave the scene because they said they had to be questioned. They said they weren't going to give me my 5-year-old, but he was so hysterical that I told him to run under the tape and come to me. So I was able to get him. We found out on the scene that Casey was pronounced dead. They alerted the Columbus Police Department, and there was an officer out there that was communicating with my sister. So he alerted my sister. So we found out on the scene that Casey had died. I mean, afterwards, I left the scene because there was no reason for me to still be out there. And my 5-year-old was so hysterical. We all gathered at my home. My mother had a stroke that night from being overwhelmed. She fell and hit her head. She was in the hospital for a few days. She did get out the hospital, but recently she started deteriorating. I knew something was wrong. So my sister and I rushed her to the emergency room. When she hit her head that night, her head has been bleeding since. And she just underwent brain surgery, which all stems from December 4th when Jason Meade executed my son for no reason. We really don't have no answers. The FBI is working with us. I do believe in my heart they're doing everything that they can, but it's been 64 days, like Sarah said. The murderer still has a job. We don't know if he's on paid leave still. We don't know if he's working in the department. We're not getting any answers. His boss refuses to speak with me. I've requested to speak with him several times. He refuses. to have any communication with me whatsoever. His name is Dallas Baldwin. He is Jason Mead's boss. He is the one that put Jason Mead on the assignment where he knew Jason Mead was not a suitable officer to be put on any type of assignment of that nature. I want him locked up. You know, he doesn't deserve to have a job. He doesn't. I mean, we need justice. You know, I do ask you guys that, you know, if there's anything that y'all can help us do in our pursuit of justice for Casey, that you do that. And getting me fired, he doesn't. I believe when it first happened, I do know that he was on a paid leave. I don't know how long that leave was. I don't know if he's still being paid. Like he said in his sermons, these are vacations to him. This is a vacation. He can kill a man in cold blood. He shot my son multiple times in his back through a door. My son was standing in between the screen door and the big door. He had put his key in the big door, turned the key, and was able to open the door, and then got shot as he was stepping up into his home. It's a cold blood murder. My son couldn't have been a threat to you. His back was to you. Every bullet hole my son took went through a door. How was he pointing a gun at you? He had Subway sandwiches in one hand and was opening his door with the other. But we're here 64 days later with no answers, no arrest, no charges. This man still has his job. We don't know where he's at, if he's paid, if he's working. Do they got him in the office working? Is he at home working? Is he at home collecting money on his vacation like he calls it? We don't know. We just want justice.
Thank you, Tamala.
Thank you very much. Commissioners,
May I?
Please, Mireille.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Gelsomino, and thank you, Mrs. Payne. I have one or three questions. First, is I would like to understand in the short report, in the short material we got yesterday, is it noted the Bureau of Criminal Investigation said we cannot accept this case because so much time has passed before the case was referred to BCA. Sorry. And I would like to know if there is some limitation, regular limitation by law for that. Maybe I ask another question?
Sure.
Sure, okay. And okay, also the Mead's attorney, Mark Collins, said on the 24th December, Mead had not yet met with investigators, which said Mark Collins, it's uncommon. And did you ask about that to understand why there is no meeting with investigator after the murder of Casey. And if I may also, I am wondering, when he's at the church, when we heard his speech at the church, it's really hate speech. The content of his speech is hate speech. Yes. And I'm wondering if there is no law about hate speech, because really it justifies using God to kill the people. Yes. And it is what Ku Klux Klan could say. And really it is an issue, I think, for us. It is an issue to see deeply what does it mean when people are have a hate speech and nothing is done against them, and they can continue their job and kill the people and without reason, without any reason. And for that also, my last question, and I'm sorry to Sir Roberts, my last question is concerned, is there conflict of interest between his role at the church and his job as a police, as a representative of law, of a state law representative?
Thank you for those very considered questions. And there's really, even though we don't have so much information about the investigation, there really is so much here to unpack, and I would be happy to supply you with additional materials after the hearing to try to follow up if we aren't able to cover all of these. The investigation issue here was very unique, I believe, and I am glad that you brought it up. Typically, well, right immediately after Casey was murdered, the Columbus Division of Police brought in their investigation team, and they did an investigation for a period of days. They held that investigation for 3 days. The Columbus Division of Police Critical Incident Review Team, CIRT, they call it, is an extremely problematic organization that has been, there is an immense amount of information and evidence that has been uncovered regarding CIRT over the years to show that they just immediately consider the shooting to be justified. They treat it is their policy that the officer who shoots is not to be treated as a suspect and should never feel that they are a suspect. And all of those investigations end up with a justified finding. It is a kangaroo court kind of investigation, and it is not a true investigation. However, for 3 days, the Columbus Division of Police held that scene and was in charge of the investigation. After those days, they realized, much in part, I think, due to public pressure, that they needed to get an independent agency in to evaluate this shooting. They asked the Bureau of Criminal Investigations, which is our state investigatory body, to come in and investigate. That is very normal in the state of Ohio for a law enforcement agency to call in BCI to do the investigation after a shooting, to provide some kind of independent, or at least, you know, hope more independent than the agency itself investigating the use of force. However, BCI said, we don't know what's been happening for 3 days on this scene. Evidence can be compromised, witnesses gone. We're not going to touch it. They refused to get involved because they believed that the Columbus Division of Police could have so messed it up in those days that they couldn't be sure that they could do a good and thorough investigation. Then it was kind of in limbo for a little while until thankfully the FBI agreed to come in and conduct a real investigation, and they have, as we've stated, appear to be doing so. So there was a real hot potato here for a while, and unfortunately, we will never know, we may never know exactly how much evidence was compromised in those few days and how the investigation could be, you know, permanently flawed as a result of those days of mishandling by the Columbus Division of Police. In terms of Meade's involvement or statement, he did not give a statement until weeks after the shooting and much time to consult with his legal team, his legal defense team. Often, unfortunately, in police shootings, we see that police officers, the person who uses the force, who should be the person being investigated for that use of force for criminal and internal charges, it is not forced to give a statement for a long time. They are not taken into custody immediately. They have a support team that surrounds them, and they are taken away from the scene, and they go home. And then they get to meet with not only their union representatives, but also their criminal defense team, their legal team, before they give a statement. And often that does not happen for a while. And that is what happened here too. We have no reason to think that the FBI didn't want to talk to him any sooner. I believe that they did want to speak to Meade as soon as possible. But it was a long time before he submitted to a statement. I'm glad you brought up hate laws. In fact, Attorney Walton and I were discussing that just this morning when we were discussing Meade's statements. I do believe that that is hate speech. It is horrifyingly dangerous and upsetting speech. And this is, again, why we believe that the department needs to fire him and take some really drastic action here. And we will see what kind of charges the FBI and the Department of Justice are considering, if any, to present to a grand jury. We don't know that yet. But there are hate speech, there are hate crime laws in this country that could be considered, I believe. And in terms of the conflict of interest between the way that he is justifying his police activity through his belief in his God, there's just a lot there. I'm not sure exactly how to address that in a short period of time, except that I do think it is problematic because he clearly is following the laws of his God and the way that he interprets them, and putting that above and beyond the laws of this country and the laws of this state. And when he can step outside the bounds of the Constitution and murder a young Black man and then justify that through his belief in his God, there is a major problem. And we hope that people can see that very clearly. I'm glad that you raised that here today, and it needs to be dealt with, and he needs to be fired.
We have passed the 5-minute mark to go. I'm sure Sir Clare has questions.
I do. Thank you very much. Mrs. Payne, I give you my deepest condolences at this tragic killing of your son on behalf of myself and this International Commission. Please know that by this hearing, the tragedy is being given international spotlight. Know that you are not alone. Be strong. I have two questions. One has to do with the recruitment, discipline, and discipline of police officers. How can it be that Jason Meade, with this sordid past, is still a police officer? So what in the system is there to supervise, monitor, and discipline policemen? Ms. Gelsomino talked of the oversight. Is there an oversight board committee that reviews complaints? Retraining, what sort of retraining is there? So that is one. What in the system can pick up these warning signs of unfitness to be in the force? That is one. The other question, very quickly, is how much faith can the family and the public place that the system that exists now will bring about justice? For instance, will the investigation, how much faith can they place in that the investigation will be independent, that the prosecutors will not be on the side of the police? So those are my two quick questions.
I will address the first one quickly, and then Tamala, maybe you can address the second about this, what you hope from the system, and whether you believe that it can bring you any kind of justice. In terms of the system and the culture of policing, I mean, this is, I'm sure you've heard this multiple times throughout the duration of this tribunal. There is a culture of impunity throughout policing in this country that is insidious and unchecked. There are multiple layers of protections for police officers that have completely created a system of police officers running wild without any true discipline or supervision. Police unions play a part in that because they have very large and unchecked power in terms of setting up procedural protections for their police officers when it comes to discipline. And municipalities agree to those demands of the unions. There are improper disciplinary systems within the department. And I believe that one of the things that can help that is the implementation of effective early warning systems. We see that in some departments where a true early warning system could flag someone like Jason Mead. If you have a number of concerning issues, then those should be flagged and consolidated and reviewed regularly and proactively to try to catch those people who are doing bad within the department. But the code of silence, where in this brotherhood of police officers where they protect each other, whereas Jason Mead said in his video, one of them throws in a punch, then the others will just jump in without thinking. And then afterwards, they support each other by covering up that misconduct, regularly lying in police reports, regularly lying in statements, and supervisors do nothing to stop it. I have police misconduct cases in many states in this country. Unfortunately, I've been 15 or 16 from Ohio, and I see this in departments throughout the entire state. It's the same problem over and over. Qualified immunity, I'm sure, has been raised to you. That is a legal doctrine, a court-created doctrine that provides massive immunity for police officers and prevents the kind of legal accountability in civil rights cases, and that must end. And there is a movement to end qualified immunity, because every time the courts say that what the officer did, that an officer cannot be held civilly liable for constitutional violations, it sends a message to other officers, not just in that department, but across the country, that they can continue to get away with this. And I do believe that your comment about an oversight board is an important one. There is no statewide oversight commission of police here. There is no professional association mandating particular training or oversight of police officers within this state. And I do think that could help with an officer, if an officer, as lawyers and many other professions, have professional boards that monitor their behavior and complaints against them, that could help with policing, and that doesn't happen. We often see even civilian complaints made against police officers are discounted. They're not considered part of employment reviews, and they're not considered, not even added into any early warning systems that do exist in many departments that I work with. So if a civilian is making a complaint of excessive force, it often just falls flat, and it's not incorporated into a holistic review of a police officer's behavior. I could go on. And again, if there's additional questions, please go ahead and ask them. But I would like to give Tamala the last word and an opportunity to discuss very quickly her concept of justice with the system.
It's hard to have faith, although I do believe that the FBI is conducting a thorough, transparent investigation. I'm really left with no choice but to put my trust in them. I don't really have faith in them. I try to keep my faith more in God. They're the police at the end of the day. They all protect each other. I am praying that they see that this was a senseless, cold-blooded execution done by a man who uses his gun in badge to murder Black men. He uses his religious beliefs in his church and his platform to brag on police brutality and how he uses excessive force, and also how he kills, innocent people. So I'm just praying. It's not a lot of faith in the justice system. They failed us countless times, I'm left with no choice but to put my trust in them, but I pray.
Thank you very much. And the commission as a whole, and I'm sure all of us, send very strong support to you
Thank you.
and to your family. clearly grasping not only the execution of your son, but the torture that your family is going through. And thank you very much, Sarah. This concludes the hearing of the case of Casey Goodson. We'll now have a break. Hearings will resume on the hour with the case of Vincent Truitt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.